Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel, Reading Ideas. I'm going to discuss a couple of books with you today. I did a recent video on Hemingway's pared back style and advice to Maupassant from Flaubert that kind of seemed to echo a little bit of Hemingway's style. Whether Maupassant followed all the advice to the letter is another thing, but it's that's that kind of style, more simplified, cutting out adjectives, writing about things in a realistic way rather than the kind of Victorian invented way, and kind of a bit romanticized, overwrought, Wuthering Heights type of writing. So the two books that I've got today are there's something similar about them, which I'll mention afterwards, but it's two of the most different writing styles in another sense that I've come across. The two books are Manhattan Transfer by John Dos Passos and Under a Glass Bell short stories by Anais. She's famous for her raunchy writing, but this isn't that. It's one particular short story that I'll talk about. So this is John Dos Passos. So there's I read about a conversation between Hemingway and John Dos Passos, and when this came out, he was quite big, but his name was quite big for this style, but it's it seems to be a writer that he's not really mentioned a lot now. So this is from the introduction, which is written by J. McInerney. So this is a snippet. Most critics agree that Manhattan Transfer registers a fervent denunciation of a society that subsumes and crushes the individual. And yet Dos Passos' method may be almost too mimetic of the disease he portrays, his condemnation so complete that it is difficult for the reader to insert a wedge of judgment. The rapid transit, discontinuous narrative brilliantly captures the pace of the city, the sense of brief, promiscuous contact with other lives. The metallically impersonal narrative voice carries the hard-edged din of the city at the same time that it keeps us at a distance from the residents. Though it may swoop down from the smoky Manhattan skies from time to time to inhabit one of the characters, we are never long in the presence of a sympathetic consciousness. The danger with this method is that the victims of oppression are damned along with their chains. Quite nicely written, that. So this is the start section. It's quite impersonal. First section: ferry slip. 3 gulls wheel above the broken boxes, orange rinds, spoiled cabbage heads that heave between the splintered plank walls. The green waves spume under the round bow as the ferry, skidding on the tide, crashes, gulps the broken water, slides, settles slowly into the slip. Hand winches whirl with jingle of chains, gates fold upwards, feet step out across the crack. Men and women press through the manure-smelling wood tunnel of the ferry house, crushed and jostling like apples fed down a chute into a press. The nurse, holding the basket at arm's length as if it were a bedpan, opened the door to a big dry hot room with greenish distempered walls, wherein the air tinctured with smells of alcohol and iodoform hung, writhing, a faint, sourish squalling from other baskets along the wall. As she set her basket down, she glanced into it with pursed-up lips. The newborn baby squirmed in the cotton wool, feebly, like a knot of earthworms. On the ferry there was an old man playing the violin. He had a monkey's face puckered up in one corner, and kept time with the toe of a cracked patent leather shoe. Bud Corpening sat on the rail watching him, his back to the river. The breeze made the hair stir round the tight line of his cap and dried the sweat on his temples. His feet were blistered. He was leaden tired, but when the ferry moved out of the slip, bucking the little slapping scalloped waves of the river, he felt something warm and tingling shoot suddenly through all his veins. "Say, friend, how far is it into the city from where this ferry lands?" he asked a young man in a straw hat, wearing a blue and white striped necktie, who stood beside him. The young man's glance moved up from Bud's road-swelled shoes to the red wrist that stuck out from the frayed sleeves of his coat, past the skinny turkey's throat, and slid up cockily into the intent eyes under the broken visored cap. "That depends where you want to get to." "How do I get to Broadway?" "I want to get to the centre of things." "Walk east a block and turn down Broadway, and you'll find the centre of things if you walk far enough." "Thank you, sir, I'll do that." The violinist was going through the crowd with his hat held out, the wind ruffling the wisps of hair on his shabby bald head. Bud found the face tilted up at him. The crushed eyes, like two black pins, looked into his. "Nothing," he said gruffly, and turned away to look at the expanse of river bright as knife blades. The plank walls of the slip closed in, cracked as the ferry lurched against them. There was rattling of chains, and Bud was pushed forward among the crowd through the ferry house. He walked between two coal wagons and out over a dusty expanse of street towards yellow streetcars. A trembling took hold of his knees. He thrust his hands deep into his pockets. Eat on a lunch wagon halfway down the block. He slid stiffly onto a revolving stool and looked for a long time at the price list. "Fried eggs and a cup of coffee." "Want 'em turned over?" asked the red-haired man behind the counter, who was wiping off his beefy freckled forearms with his apron. Bud Corpening sat up with a start. "What?" "The eggs. Want 'em turned over or sunny side up?" "Oh, sure, turn 'em over." Bud slouched over the counter again, with his head between his hands. "You look all in, fella," the man said, as he broke the eggs into the sizzling grease of the frying pan. "Came down from upstate. I walked 15 miles this morning." The man made a whistling sound through his eye teeth. "Coming to the big city to look for a job, eh?" Bud nodded. The man flopped the eggs sizzling and netted with brown onto the plate and pushed it towards Bud with some bread and butter on the edge of it. "I'm going to slip you a bit of advice, fella, and it won't cost you nothing. You go and get a shave and a haircut and brush the hayseeds out of your suit a bit before you start looking. You'll be more likely to get something. It's looks that count in this city." "I can work all right. I'm a good worker," growled Bud with his mouth full. "I'm telling yous, that's all," said the red-haired man, and turned back to the stove. So, yeah, it's Manhattan Transfer. So he's talking about the city, and it goes like that in bits, bit of a description of a ferry, then there's a girl, and then there's a chap, and then, yeah, it's a little bit like Hemingway's style in that things are described as they are, not romanticised. But unlike Hemingway put his writing into a story, had characters, The character development is very little. It is, like that person said, it's just like seeing people for a bit in the city as you pass them on a train and what have you. So you get the style of writing. So I'm going to read now from Anais Under a Glass Bell. So this is a completely different style. So not cold, no emotion, just written as it's seen. You'll see. So this is from Anais Under a Glass Bell. It's a short story called Ragtime. The city was asleep on its right side and shaking with violent nightmares. Long puffs of snoring came out of the chimneys. Its feet were sticking out because the clouds did not cover it altogether. There was a hole in them, and the white feathers were falling out. The city had untied all the bridges like so many buttons to feel at ease. Wherever there was a lamplight, the city scratched itself until it went out. Trees, houses, telegraph poles lay on their side. The ragpicker walked among the roots, the cellars, the breathing sewers, the open pipeworks, looking for odds and ends, for remnants, for rags, broken bottles, paper, tin, and old bread. The ragpicker walked in and out of the pockets of the sleeping city with his ragpicker's pick, in and out of the pockets over the watch chain on its belly, in and out of the sleeves, around its dusty collar, through the wands of its hair, picking the broken strands to repair mandolins, the fringe on the sleeve, the crumbs of bread, the broken watch face, the grains of tobacco, the subway ticket, the string, the stamp. The ragpicker worked in silence among the stains and smells. His bag was swelling. I'll cut that bit out. Maybe not. The city turned slowly on its left side, but the eyes of the houses remained closed and the bridges unclasped. The ragpicker worked in silence and never looked at anything that was whole. His eyes sought the broken, the worn, the faded, the fragmented. A complete object made him sad. What could one do with a complete object? Put it in a museum? Not touch it? But a torn paper, a shoelace without its double, a cup without saucer that was stirring. They could be transformed, melted into something else. A twisted piece of pipe. Wonderful, this basket without a handle. Wonderful, this bottle without a stopper. Wonderful, the box without a key. Wonderful, half a dress. The ribbon off a hat. A fan with a feather missing. Wonderful, the camera plate without the camera. The lone bicycle wheel. Half a phonograph disc. Fragments, incompleted worlds, rags, detritus, the end of objects and the beginning of transmutations. The ragpicker shook his head with pleasure. He had found an object without a name. It shone. It was round. It was inexplicable. The ragpicker was happy. He would stop searching. The city would be waking up with the smell of bread. His bag was full. There were fleas in it, pirouetting. The tail of a dead cat for luck. His shadow walked after him, bent twice as long. The bag on the shadow was the hump of a camel, the beard, the camel's muzzle. The camel's walk up and down the sand dunes. The camel's walk up and down. I sat on the camel's hump. It took me to the edge of the city. No trees, no bridge, no pavement. Earth. Plain earth trodden dead. Shacks of smoke-stained wood from demolished buildings. Between the shacks, gypsy carts. Between the shacks and the carts, a path so narrow that one must walk Indian file. Around the shacks, palisades. Inside the shacks, rags. Rags for beds, rags for chairs, rags for tables. On the rags, men, women, brats. Inside the women, more brats. Fleas. Elbows resting on an old shoe. head resting on a stuffed deer whose eyes hung loose on a string. The rag picker gives the woman the object without a name. The woman picks it up and looks at the blank disc, then behind it. She hears tick, 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 tick. She says it is a clock. The rag picker puts it to his ear and agrees it ticks like a clock. But since its face is blank, they will never know the time. Tick, 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 the beat of time and no hour showing. The tip of the shack is pointed like an Arab tent. The windows are bleak like oriental eyes. On the sill a flower pot. Flowers made of beds and iron stems, which fell from a tomb. The woman waters them, and the stems are rusty. The brats sitting in the mud are trying to make an old shoe float like a boat. The woman cuts her thread with half a scissor. The rag picker reads the newspaper with broken specs. The children go to the fountain with leaky pails. When they come back, the pails are empty. The rag pickers crouch around the contents of their bags. Nails fall out. A roof tile. A signpost with letters missing. Out of the gypsy cart behind them comes a torso on stilts, with his head twisted to one side. What had he done with his legs and arms? Were they under the pile of rags? Had he been thrown out of a window? A fragment of a man found at dawn. Through the cracks in the shacks came the strum of a mandolin with one string. The rag picker looks at me with his one leaking eye. I pick a basket without bottom, the rim of a hat, the lining of a coat. Touch myself. Am I complete? Arms, legs, hair, eyes. Where is the sole of my foot? I take off my shoe to see, to feel, laugh. Glued to my soul is a blue rag, ragged but blue like cobalt dust. The rain falls. I pick up the skeleton of an umbrella, sit on a hill of corks perfumed by the smell of wine. A rag picker passes, the handle of a knife in his hand. With it he points to a path of dead oysters. At the end of the path is my blue dress. I had wept over its death. I had danced in it when I was 17, danced until it fell into pieces. I try to put it on and come out to the other side. I cannot stay inside of it. Here I am, and there the dress, and I forever out of the blue dress I had loved. And I dance right through air, and fall on the floor, because one of my heels came off, the heel I lost on a rainy night, walking up a hill, kissing my loved one deliriously. Where are all the other things, I say? Where are all the things I thought dead? The rag picker gave me a wisdom tooth, and my long hair which I had cut off. Then he sinks into a pile of rags, and when I try to pick him up, I find a scarecrow in my hands, with sleeves full of straw and a high-top hat with a bullet hole through it. The rag pickers are sitting around a fire made of broken shutters, window frames, artificial beards, chestnuts, horses' tails, last year's holy palm leaves. The cripple sits on the stump of his torso with his stilts beside him. Out of the shacks and the gypsy carts come the women and the brats. Can't one throw anything away forever? I asked. The rag picker laughs out of the corner of his mouth, half a laugh, a fragment of a laugh, and they all begin to sing. First came the breath of garlic, which they hang like little red Chinese lanterns in their shacks. The breath of garlic, followed by a serpentine song. Nothing is lost but it changes. Into the new string, old string. Into the new bag, old bag. Into the new pan, old tin. In the new shoe, old leather. In the new silk, old hair. In the new hat, old straw. In the man, the child. And the new, not new. The new, not new. The new, not new. All night the rag picker sang the new, not new, the new, not new, until I fell asleep, and they picked me up and put me in a bag. So, oh God, both of them hard work, very hard work for me. You know, and the kids picked up, you know, went with a bucket, but it was leaking, and when they got back, it wasn't there. All right, fair enough. You know, this just, you know, going on and on and on and on and on, and, you know, where's the characters, where's the story? So very, very different styles, completely made up, you know, obviously, you know, a bucket's a bucket, but made up. You know, the city was asleep on its side and it rolled over, and the bridges were its belt, and, you know, so everything's descriptive and dreamlike, and, you know, buckets don't work, and, you know, a bit weird and created. So this kind of reminds me of, you know, well, she's female, isn't she? So, you know, like the clever girl in the English class at school who the English teacher liked. Oh, this brilliant essay, she's really made it up. She's used her imagination. You know, she's used synonyms. You know, she's compared this to that. Oh, it's, you know, and oh, the city's asleep. And then it rolls over. Oh, isn't that, you know, can't you picture it in your head? And he's picturing the city by trying to describe it exactly. No emotion, just, you know, there's the ferry, it swashes against the shore. Yeah, and so you only get the emotion from, you know, what's picked. You know, there are things that happen, I think, you know, somebody gets run over, or, I tried reading it 4 times, I think, over, and never quite finished it. It would always just kind of like, I don't know what, it's just one of those, it would just kind of like, oh, I haven't been reading it, what's going on? I'll start again, you know, a couple of years later. I can't get through it, cannot get through it. Yeah. So, you know, do people like this now? Is that still a book that's around? Anyone know of this book? You know, she's more famous for her naughty books, but yeah, all that kind of invented. So I thought, when I read that ragtime story, I thought that's the complete opposite of Hemingway. But, you know, John Dos Passos is even more distilled than Hemingway. To me, those are the two most opposite books in one way. However, they are similar in a different way. Well, hang on, before I said that, I think I'm pretty sure that I remember reading that she read that and was kind of like, oh, like give her the shakes, like, oh no, you know, it's a brilliant book. This is how I really want to write, but I can't. I find that interesting. So, you know, spending all the time trying to invent stuff, trying to cleverly invent things, and he's trying cleverly to observe things. But what they had in common is she described, you know, she's part of that, you know, early 1900s, you know, extending further on, you know, all that development of writing that was trying to copy from photography, from art, from Cézanne, from the Impressionists, and she tried to write, not all the time, but tried to write in a collage effect. So bringing things in a collage effect. And I would argue that this is kind of like a collage, just bits of snippets of city Manhattan American life. So very, very different, yet that common thread of a kind of a collage effect. Any thoughts, anybody? So I wouldn't say recommendations, but you've had a bit of a clip. You fancy reading one of those. You know, can you think of 2 books that are the most opposite that you've come across? Bye for now, everybody. Happy reading.